What a fabulous audience to start off GLF with, and what an incredible day one. Thank you to all of you for being here. And I'm very, very excited to be on this panel today, titled very aptly, The Personal and the Political. I've done my political duty this morning. I don't know how many of you have come from Mumbai. I hope all of you who've come here from Mumbai have voted, because otherwise I'm going to be very cross with you. You're not getting the mic to speak today. And I am thrilled to be in conversation with two people I have admired so deeply for so long, and I'll tell you why. I'll start with you, Karuna. The first time I met Karuna was at a ramen shop in Delhi, in GK2 M Block Market, which is single-handedly the worst place on this planet because it has the worst lighting and the most crowded sort of streets. But I was amazed because Karuna, in this sort of dingy little ramen shop with white lighting, still managed to look just as spectacular as she is looking today, and emanated this sort of glory that filled that whole shop with a radiance. Now I met Alok at Kitty Soup, very different setting, for the first time, and they entered glamorous as ever and held court as they must, and they do, not only because of the work that they've done, but also with the care that they bring to a room. And every single person there felt so delighted to be in their company, but also so starstruck to be in the presence of celebrity. And I want to start off with these characterizations to ask both of you, in this whole debate between the personal and the political, the sort of personal becomes an integral sort of lightning rod that channels the political. But both of you, as poets, as writers, as sort of people in the world with a public presence, carry the weight of so many people and so many struggles on your shoulders. What allows you to have a lightness of being when you're taking yourself seriously but also not taking yourself seriously? With you, Kyle.
I think what you said at the end is actually so imperative. And you said, when you're taking yourself seriously, but actually not. And I think it's in the actually not where one has to exist much more, especially as things around us grow harder and more difficult. And I think I speak for a global landscape when I say that it is a struggle right now. And on a personal level, with everything I've been through as well, I found that the only way to actually combat looking darkness in the eye is humor, and is keeping that lightness very active. And I think the opposite would be being completely submerged, right? And I don't think you're of use to anyone, least of all yourself, and certainly not others when you're doing that.
And look, humor is very important to you. You're performing tonight in Jaipur. For all of those here tonight, please go catch their performance in Jaipur, and then in Delhi, and then in Bangalore. And your stand-up sets are deeply political, deeply unsettling, but also hilarious. What does that balance look like?
I mean, I'd hope they'd be hilarious, otherwise people would riot. Listen, I recently started doing this thing where instead of laughing, I cackle like a witch.
I just heard it.
And it's brought so much joy to people. And people keep on asking me, why do you do that? And I just say, one day, I just started cackling and I couldn't stop. And that's really my approach to life right now, is how can I accessorize every minute on Earth with camp? How do I make everything just even more ridiculous? And in doing so, nothing becomes ominous. There's a way in which I feel humor gets defanged as something that's incidental or as something that's superfluous. But I think humor is a political strategy. Stand-up is not just a genre, it's a question of how do we stand up in a world that's trying to disparage and degrade us. When you laugh, your body has a kind of intuitive wisdom where it enlarges and shakes things off of you. And so for me, laughter has always been a way of shaking things off of me. Every time I'm being oppressed, I say, thank you for the comedic material. That's so sweet.
Yeah, humor is not benign. It is so powerful. And I think, like you said, it's honestly, it's alarming how much people think that you are making circumstances softer but it's not. You're making them larger. You're making them stronger when you actually take that approach. And so I really dislike this attitude that it is benign.
And that's also a very interesting queering of politics as well, right, in some ways, because you're taught that being political or making a statement means being the sort of solitary Enlightenment era intellectual in your little ivory tower and being pedantic and talking to the masses and not being funny because that's not serious enough. And there is a certain sense of isolation in that as well. And I think what both of you break free from is that both of your initial journeys, but also your journeys now, come from a very strong place of community. And I want to start on this with you, Alok, that when Dark Matter was sort of formed and you were touring across, I was in college and I remember coming for a show. And I remember there being such an electric energy because it felt like queerness was being seen, but also that it was being created in that moment. That it was not just performance, but a sense of collective imagining that was taking place in those moments. How do you create through community, and how do you sort of, where does one start that process? How did that process start? How did it end up here?
Welcome to group therapy, everyone. Okay, wow, I feel attacked. So as a kid, I felt dysphoria not just in terms of gender, but in terms of humanness. I always felt outside of humans. From a young age, I would ask my mom, why am I not an ant? As a very serious line of moral inquiry. And it's because I found humans to be so freaking annoying. Things that were so obvious, like talking about your feelings, you're not allowed to do, what a sham. And everybody's just going around pretending that they're okay when they're not. Everyone's pretending that they're monogamous when they're not. Everyone's pretending that like marriage will make you mature when it obviously doesn't. And so as a kid, I was just like, can anyone tell the truth? And everyone just sort of agreed somewhere that they were all gonna lie and pretend and only be honest in art. So what we've done is we've created a society where art is the one socially sanctioned space to be real. Everything else is performance, and that's what I understand as a performance artist. My job is to be a mirror, right? People think I'm performing, but I'm looking at crowds that are doing it every single day better than I ever will. And so what I began to actually realize is that art is a unique location within the societies that we've created to actually be honest about the fact that everybody's lonely and everybody's struggling and everyone feels confused and everyone's half-baked and inchoate and unformed. And so I became an ambassador of that space, which is, to your point, a queer space. What queerness for me was not just about gender and sexuality, but being okay with trying and becoming and processes. Moving away from destinations toward orientations, towards actual ways of being in the world that are in flight and in process. And I think what's really sad in the past few years, I've been doing this for a while, is that the incorporation of queerness has nullified that integral component of fluidity. It's become about what is your identity. It's become about pinpointing what do you do. Are you a poet? Are you a comedian? What is your biography? And I think the joy of queerness is, I don't know. I'm figuring it out. Watch me dance with it. And so that spirit of aliveness is, I think, what mobilizes my work, is because when you give permission for people to be feral and rambunctious and ridiculous, there's a sense of relief that comes from that.
When you allow them to cackle.
Yes.
I wanna pull on that tension with you, Karuna, and sort of your book of poetry makes that amply evident. In your introduction, you write very beautifully about, being an Instagram poet initially and this expectation of filters that will make you look better and this performed self online that looks very different from who you are in person. But you also sort of built in that space of inauthenticity a sense of community through a level of authenticity that came through your poetry. So what was that like? What is the process of creating in community when perhaps that community isn't people in front of you? It's people who are liking Instagram posts. And what also comes with that sort of pressure to create what people are consuming?
So I think the start point for us and for so many artists is loneliness, right? And that sense of isolation. And both of us have actually put out our art through the social media platform. And we've seen so much change with it. And to your point about queerness as well, I think the problem with the medium we use is that it rewards being boxed in, right? It rewards calling yourself one thing. And personally, I feel very against that because none of us, we all contain multitudes, right? And I'm so against that, and I feel so disheartened by it. And it's very difficult when this is the platform that has kind of made you and celebrates you, and then it demands the opposite of what you support and what you want to be. And one of the, and so I found that it was making me lonely all over again. And one of the ways in which I could combat it was actually by reaching out to that community and saying, okay, what brought me here? What made me write? This sense of loneliness, I wanted to reach out and find, voice those things and have other people reflect that. And the only way for me to come back to that was reading, right? Because reading is what also made me write. Like as a lonely child, I just read, right? And it's why I created a reading community. And one of the things I've found with it is that when I can write a novel, of course, and I can say, I think this, and you should think this, but what I find far more interesting is saying, what do you think? And exchanging those ideas. So I think that's what it's brought back to me. And that's what interests me far more than putting out my opinion, is actually creating a space where I can hear other voices, which actually feels very difficult today. And who gets to speak and who gets to speak loudest, and what we see and what we don't see, how censorship works, to kind of not try and walk through it or fight through it, but walk around it and create a different circle.
And I think, in many ways, you've spoken about this before as well, but that urge to speak out comes from a space of wanting to find community. But when you speak out and you go viral, it comes with expectations. Yeah. And you've dealt with some of that. And you became a viral sensation.
It is how people first came to my work, and it was
and then you were expected to speak out on everything.
Absolutely.
So how do you negotiate that? How do you keep that authenticity when the world demands so much of you? Every day, I think so many of us see so many things that we want to scream our lungs out about.
I think at this point, after all these years, it's like what Alok was saying. You respond with ridiculousness because the demand is ridiculous. And the people who stick around for it, they are your community.
And I want to take that to you, Alok, and say that, your first book was created again as a protest of sorts. You toured the entire country with it. Femme in Public became a sensation, also because it was very difficult to be femme in public, much as it is now. What was the urgency that brought the sort of creation of that first book? And where do you see that urgency now? How do we keep that urgency alive?
Well, what was happening was that I was just being punished for being glamorous, which is really womp womp for all parties involved. Imagine doing that, not punishing people for being authoritarian, but for being glamorous. So what would happen is I would go outside being me, and then people would try to kill me, which is so boring in the scheme of the world. The genre of literature that straight people just remain committed to is the death threat. It's where they express themselves most creatively and robustly. If they could just apply that due diligence to their fiction, we'd be in a better place. But anyways, and so my life was being threatened, and everywhere I went, I was in a constant state of PTSD. I never felt safe anywhere. And there was so much I wanted to say to the people who were harassing me, girl, what are you doing? But you can't, because you might die. And so poetry became the place that I've always gone to say the things that I can't say anywhere else. And so I started to write to the people who were harassing me, and I expected there to be a lot of anger and frustration, but in fact what I found is tenderness and forgiveness and empathy, because through my writing process, I began to realize that those people were just envious of me. All homophobia and transphobia are envy projects. People require homophobia and transphobia because then they can spend their time pointing at other people. But every time you point at me, 3 fingers are pointed back at yourself. Oh! It's a way of escaping your own pain, creating a bridge away from your own problems, pretending that your family and your relationship are functional and fine, which is fake news. So what happened is I found deep love, and I was confused by it. And at first I denied it. So I'd be like, okay, let me keep writing. And then I kept on finding more and more and more love. And I think that's why I believe in poetry. I think that's what this panel's about. I always forget. Is because poetry for me allowed me to learn a deeper truth, which is separation is a lie. So when you're talking about community, people often think that I'm just in community with artists or with trans people, and I'm like, that's boring, unambitious. I'm in community with every single thing in the world. I'm in community with the stars and the dust and migraines and my mom's trauma, like all of it. And I sign up for all of it because I sign up to be enmeshed in the world. I don't believe that I'm outside. I don't think that there's any outside. And that's what poetry teaches us through metaphor, because metaphor is a sophisticated technology of connection. Through metaphor, you can make any two things, no matter how ostensibly dissonant they are, find harmony. And in that way, the job of a poet is to retune language towards social cohesion and harmony. And what I've been thinking about a lot is that the violence of hate speech is not a few bad words. It's a perversion and distortion of what language should be to begin with. That language is about social connectivity, building social fabric and connection. Hate speech ruptures that contract. So I think that book really built my career of wanting to say, what is love speech? Why do we have frameworks for hate speech, not love speech? Why is love speech not something that's publicized, proclaimed, subscribed to? And I'm just trying to do love speech. And what love speech is saying out loud a reminder to everyone, you're going to try your damnedest to pretend like I have nothing to do with you. But the more you deny it, the more you're confessing it. You're obsessed with me. And that's okay, because I'm obsessed with you too, because we are one another.
And I think the most beautiful thing that you've done is you've made a life study of the straight community.
Oh my God, I'm an anthropologist.
And sort of turned this into an art form of observation. And you've sort of taken this hate, processed it, and converted it into what you call love speech. What does love speech mean to you?
I was just going to say that one of the things that I love that you do is respond to the people who spew so much hate towards you. And it's something I noticed a long time ago when I was, on your Instagram, and I would see these comments that were so negative and so hurtful, and they are designed to hurt you. And your response was always one of empathy. And it's something that I've thought about really deeply as well, this idea that our pains, they can turn you bitter, and bitterness would be the most natural response. But the other direction you can go in is one to be deeply empathetic. And I've experienced some of this in the last few years, and we were just talking about this, that being as unwell as I have been in the last few years, and being kind of hit in the face by life, there is, of course, the question of why me? There's always the question of how dare life do this to me? What have I done to deserve this? And the truth is nothing. And maybe this is the wonderful experience as well. Maybe this is part of it. And maybe this is the engagement with life that you didn't ask for, but has its own kind of blessings along the way. And everyone asks, but how do you process that? And how do you remain, positive is like a really kind of horrible word for this, right? But that is a word that gets thrown around a lot. But how do you remain in your empathy? And I think there is no other way, because bitterness is so boring. Who wants to go down that path, right? None of us want to be bitter, and it is your choice. And like we were talking about earlier, yes, being unwell is awful, but imagine being unwell in Gaza, imagine. And it's almost, there is something almost prosaic about saying, oh, there's always someone who has it worse than you. But it's not about that, right? It's something much deeper. It is about being entwined in this human experience, right?
And you've spoken very beautifully about this. And to add context, Karuna, you've been going through chemotherapy for a couple of years now. It's been something that you've spoken about incredibly tenderly online as well, about the ways in which ordinary experiences that brought so much joy are converted to those that you have to navigate with a very different sense of self. And often one wonders whether it would lead to a loss of urgency. You know, there's a certain way in which we're made to believe that be selfish when it comes to these sort of issues. When your body is under attack, put yourself first. But you've done the opposite. You're working on 2 new projects. You're creating with an urgency unlike ever before. And what keeps that urgency alive?
You know, I hate to say this, but I am still privileged, right? And I think that, it is just privilege. And I don't even think it's responsibility. It's not a responsibility to myself. It's more like, if I can speak, I must speak, right? And it's much more fun to do so as well. It is.
Sorry to all of you who thought this was going to be about Trump and Modi ji and all others. We've turned this into a very different conversation because I don't want either of them getting deported. And I don't want to go to jail either, so you know. But I think it's a very powerful moment we've had right now, right? I think weaving ourselves through poetry, through the act of creation, through a response to hate that centers care, I think we're arriving at almost a sort of politics of kindness that seems to be missing today, right?
And all of this is political, right? I mean, there's how you respond to these things, how we choose to dress, who we choose to love. All of it is political.
And you know, Alok, you spoke about death threats being the most imaginative currency of people who hate. And I love that because both of you get enough, and I think many of you in the audience get enough as well. If you're a person on the internet today, that's one of the most sort of
And
common.
you.
I mean, yes, and you know, it reaches a point of comedy because you're like, do I take this seriously? Do I not take this seriously? Do I report this? Do I not report this? But I want to ask that so much of this hate is centered around a policing of desire, right? Your desire is wrong. Your desire must be silenced. Your desire must be controlled. What is this urge to control this desire? It's not like you want to sleep with them. Why do they have a problem with who you sleep with or how you dress? Or your desire to look different?
Because desire actually contradicts all of the prophecies of separation. Desire shows us what is true is that every border and barrier and distinction is artificial. Desire punctuates through all of that. And I think desire as a force is where I've reallocated my political energy. In the past, it was becoming eloquent in the contours of my injury, articulating to the world the parameters of my wounds. And then I got very bored by that because that, in fact, solidifies the status quo. People want a narrative about trans suffering to justify the multi-century propaganda that being yourself is not worth it. And I began to move away from a focus on a kind of fetishistic, internet compulsive commodification of pain towards actually saying the reason you hate me is because you desire this. You desire a way of being. You desire a kind of ease with the world. You desire wearing what you want to wear. You desire not caring about what other people think. So behind all of these vitriolic projects are actually people asking for help. They're saying, how do I learn how to liberate my desire? But they don't go to therapy, they go to Congress. You know what I'm saying? So they don't really learn how to articulate that. They just like pass policy instead of writing poems, and we'd be in a very different place if people did that. And so it's just very clear to me. And I think the next piece is like, people always ask me, well, how did you come to this conclusion? Like, what books did you read? And I know we're at a literature festival, and shout out to books, really. I mean, you're doing amazing work. I love you. You're so great. Like publishing, amazing. But I think there's a way in which privileged people use books as a way to entertain the experiences of marginalized people rather than actually being adjacent to us, right? So the amount of people who are like, give me a trans memoir to understand the trans experience. I'm like, girl, what? I'm right here. Like, why do I have to make my day-to-day quotidian reality into a memoir in order for it to reach you? That's not empathy.
It's such a distancing,
It's a
right?
distancing. And actually the most powerful education I've had is being a freak. Being a freak taught me more than any graduate program. Because when you're a freak, you go outside and everybody's projecting on you. And you have to sit with that feeling in your body of everybody's looking at me, everyone's taking photos of me, everyone's laughing at me, they're turning me into memes. And then at first your response is to minimize yourself, but then if you actually expand, you begin to realize it has nothing to do with you. And so what I did is I just started walking outside and I started just being myself, and people would say, you're gonna wear that there? And I said, yes, why not? And then what I began to realize is everywhere I went, people were just confessing their deepest pains. It takes the place as faggot, you know, which really we have to be culturally sensitive. That's how straight people grieve, you know? So really understanding that.
And I want to turn to you, Karuna, because this is a beautiful way of also summing up the power that desire has. And in your novel, I think you make that power searingly obvious, you know? This idea of love breaking borders and boundaries that are artificially created. And of it being such a raw emotion that just overpowers this learned sort of hate. What does desire mean for you, and how do you...
I mean, it kind of breaks my heart when the novel comes up, just because, you know, it's been some years since I wrote it, and it was many years since I began writing it when it came out. And what's really, really tragic to me is how the story remains so relevant and almost is more relevant today, sitting in this country. The story, I mean, it's such a simple and such an old story, right? You have a Muslim boy, you have a Hindu girl, and you would think that that story is a fairy tale at this point. But what's a fairy tale is the success of that story. And I find it deeply tragic, like I said. And I suppose we just have to continue telling those stories as ones of hope, right? But for me, desire remains political. It remains, and I also see how much it is weaponized against us. And I think to wear our want very openly is protest at this point, yeah.
And I think I want to end before we open up to questions by asking that we've all encouraged everyone to express this desire, to be themselves. But we live in difficult times. I mean, we know there are things we can say on this stage and there are things that we cannot, right? There is a policing not just of the state or of society, but of oneself. And at a moment when it feels difficult to have that sense of optimism that existed maybe 10 years ago when, you know, in the US you had the It Gets Better project and everyone's saying, you know, it's only going to get better from now and come out and all be sort of rainbows and butterflies. You're at a moment when there is a sense of responsibility. There's a acknowledgement that this ends up in a very bad way for some people.
But isn't this where poetry comes in? And isn't this where art is what we continue to use to subvert it?
I've never felt more inspired, really, you know? Because what desire does is it pulls us back to one another. And what the political moment, which is really womp womp, is about, is dividing and tearing people apart. And what desire and poetry does is with the precision of a surgeon, we are actually suturing the world back together. And when I write, I feel this deep exhortation within me to actually look boldly in the face of the world and say, my preferred pronoun is we. I'm actually part of all of this, and everything I've been taught to disavow or to deny, and I think this is even within so-called progressives, right? It's very irritating the ways in which people paint such broad strokes of their enemy, I'm like, the only enemy is hatred itself, not people. The only enemy is greed, not people. I love people. And I think what desire makes me do is, let's stop articulating just what's wrong, but what's right. The world I desire is here now because I met my besties, you know? And I've met people who allow me to shapeshift and harvest my contradictions, and people who laugh at me in a way that doesn't feel demoralizing but actually picks me back up, and people who I can be sick and irritated and foolish with. And so we've been microdosing in freedom all along, and we know what it feels like. And so I don't believe this idea that freedom's not available to us. It's here. We're feeling it interpersonally. Now how do we scale it up? And I think the way that we scale it up is we start actually recognizing the lie. The lie that we're told is that we lack power, right? We might lack like institutional representation. We might lack like a TV show or whatever, though shout out to Heated Rivalry. But what we do not lack is power, because the true power is love, not capital, right? Not wealth, ew. It's love. And if we've got love on our side, we're gonna win. And I know it sounds very like 1970s of me, but I'm just really in my love revolution kind of era. Because what I began to realize, thank you, what I began to realize is when you were asking about community, community begins when we accept the community within ourselves, which means we can have so many contradicting points of view within ourselves. There's a community in me. There's people who hate me in me, and there's people who love me in me, and I love all of them. And once I accept that motley crew of all those ridiculous dissenting voices, it makes it so much easier to accept the world. What I'm saying is, the prototype for love lives within us. It's all of our organs trying their damnedest, really. I mean, shout out to them. I don't really get how lungs work, but like, I heard it's a big deal. They're really doing amazing work down there for me. And so I have no choice, once I recognize and take a forensic analysis of the love in me, to replicate the love out of me too.
You know, when both of them speak, they speak like oracles, and every word coming out of both Karuna and Alok's mouth is a pearl of wisdom that we must all cherish and keep. And I'm certainly hoping I'm keeping some of these pearls of wisdom for 9 p.m. primetime debate.
I'm shedding things
where
from
love
my
does
dress,
not seem
so.
like something I want to participate in, but I will be good, and I will fail very often, and be kind to myself and learn to love again. But on that note, can we have a loud round of applause once again for an incredible panel and for such a phenomenal conversation. We now have some exciting time for questions from the audience. And back there, the lovely person with the glasses who's raised their hands, can we have a mic to them, please? In the green, yes. Oops. Sorry, I'm making you run around. If you could raise your hand again so they can see you.
Hello. Hello. Right. Thank you so much for that. It was great. Can you hear me now? Yes. So all three of you, of course, very actively political. But with that, like for example, I'm a therapist, my work very political and of course then emotionally exhausting as well. How do you deal with the compassion fatigue that seeps in when the world is a really messed up place and it's hard? You want to care about everything all at once, but it becomes really hard. And at some point, like everything you see just weighs you down. Actually, like it's a real thing. So how do you deal with the compassion fatigue of being politically active all the time?
You go to comedy shows. I think clownery is one of the most powerful psychoanalytic therapeutic practices in the world. Clowns are my oracles. And so every time I'm feeling sad, I go and see comedy, and I see people who are not escaping from humor, but using dark comedy as a technology to deepen our ability to feel things. Why do we laugh at funerals, right? There's a primordial technology there that in a dissociated world, laughter is the first point of entry back into our bodies. And in my shows, what I'm trying to do is to make people laugh so that they establish the trust to cry. I don't think sorrow and joy are binary. That's so unambitious. Sorrow needs joy and joy needs sorrow. So every time I'm experiencing overwhelming sorrow, I'm like, oh, there's joy needing to be experienced. And when life feels too peachy, I'm like, girl, go watch Twilight. You know what I'm saying? Microdose on sadness too.
Yeah, less eloquently, but memes, essentially. every time, you know, there's some kind of awful crisis going on in the world, within 24 hours, there will be excellent memes about it. And you need to live on those memes in order to consume that news and to balance it out. That's what I do. And
Live,
poetry.
laugh, love, meme. In the first row here.
Hi, am I audible at all? I don't know, sorry. Hi, thank you. I need to spot, like, there's so much compassion on this stage right now. It's overwhelming. But also, I know, because we have so many queer people in the community, in this audience as well, it's heartening. But with all of that, with all the queerness, the tedhapan, the sidelines, the sideness, the neurodivergence, any kind of not being straight that we carry with ourselves in this world comes with a sort of like, that tedhaness is also always on the ledge. And the ledge means you are about to fall at any moment. So when you said that, who wants to be bitter? But the world will offer you so many points. When the least, and the most you want to do is be angry, because that anger has also made you survive, right? So, and this is where I go to both of you. Where do you put that anger then? Where does that anger go? Does it transform into compassion? Does it build into it? Does it sit somewhere right next to that love compartment so that it can burst again? Or does it sit with fear?
If this is a queer-specific question, would either...
I mean, I love talking, sure. I would say rage is love work. We are rageful because we want things to change, which is a loving form of connection. We could have cynicism, we could just disengage, but we're choosing to give feedback, careful, precise feedback to the world saying, F, let's do this again. That's a loving embrace. And I think rage has been rebranded as the antithesis of compassion, but it's a deeply compassionate thing to be rageful. What I think happens, though, is when the rage becomes the only note with which we know how to sustain a political life. It's like no one really, okay, I was about to say no one listens to music with one note, but there are hipsters, and I don't want to erase their experiences with experimental jazz. So that was a multi-layered joke, thank you, you'll get it in a few minutes. So one note is just kind of boring and unambitious. We need rage to live alongside, grief to live alongside, but the issue particularly is certain bodies are policed out of rage, right? There's a compulsory citizenship in this country where women and feminine people are expected to be grateful. And I think that's bogus. So we gotta up the rage, feminine rage, but that doesn't mean that that can be the only note that we sing in, if that makes sense.
I also think in terms of suppression, that's no good, right? So I think the recognition of rage is also release, and that's important too, right?
At the back there, if you could stand up, yes. Oh, go ahead. We'll come to you right after.
Thank you. I'm also a therapist, and
Oh my God, my people.
I'm sorry. What I'm seeing in the room is a pattern of lack of safety for the queer community, for queer individuals, when it comes to experiencing abuse, both from the wider community, and in intimate partner relationships. Now, my work is in the UK. My question is, what advice do you have to ensure safety for those individuals who are living in India?
And for those in intimate partner relationships as well.
Oh dear, I thought I was only going to be the moderator for this session, but you know, this is something I struggle with every single day, right? There are so many young queer people who will message me and say that they want to come out, but they don't know how to. There are so many people stuck in deeply, deeply toxic relationships that they cannot escape from because they lack the financial stability. And very often, when the state fails you, when the state cannot guarantee you protections, you have to sort of find subversive solutions. And sometimes that means letting go of a kind of perfect politics, right? I think too often we've been sort of conditioned to say that, oh, if you're gay, you have to come out of the closet, you have to be whoever you are, and you need to be out to your family. And sometimes that simply isn't possible, you know? For queer women in this country especially, one of the reasons why we fought so hard for marriage equality was because lesbian couples running away from home face the highest amount of violence because their relationship is not recognized. And it is so easy for the state to label the sort of taking away of one as a kidnapping by the other that it becomes almost impossible to fight those battles through district courts and through sort of police superintendents in tier 3 cities, that in many ways marriage, as imperfect as it is, remains a solution that you sort of aspire towards. And I think we're learning. I think there's no real answer to that question right now. For some young kids, that means get money to build a life for yourself before you come out. For others, it means figure out ways of being in community. For others, it means find that community online if you can't find it in person, and sort of try and create imaginative futures. I think we're in a difficult place right now. And I'm sorry if I don't offer more hope in that answer, but I think it is that leaving behind of a sort of perfection and a textbook definition of what you should be as a queer person that is the most emancipatory in these times. Do you want to add? We have just time for the last question. I know I promised it to you. You were standing before. Yes. We're very sorry. We're going to extend our time by a little bit.
Good evening to all of you. So as a queer person, I sometimes try to experiment with my style, like putting on nail polish or glitters sometimes.
Wait, hold the mic closer. Na.
Oh.
Ha.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So as a queer person, I sometimes try to experiment with my clothing and styles. I'm putting on nail polish or glitter near my eyes. So sometimes I have felt some hate or with the close people. But I have got my friends support. They're very supportive of it. But so, what's the best way of starting experiment with my style if I'm nervous to what people will say, be it anyone, family or anyone?
What an amazing question. So I would say there's a difference between fashion and style. Fashion is what society tells you should wear. Style is what you choose to wear. And style is a spiritual journey that will take your entire life because it's how you display your authenticity to the world, right? And style belongs to you. So people are always going to say, I don't like that. You don't belong to them. The way you develop that confidence is by learning how to develop a self-concept. Literally look in the mirror, look at yourself, and compliment yourself. Be like, I'm everything. I'm everything. Oh my God, I ate this look. This is incredible. I'm fabulous, I am fierce. It's gonna sound so ridiculous, but you've gotta build that stamina so that when people are mean and cruel to you, you can understand it has nothing to do with you. I think the second thing is to have parties with amazing costume themes. Because then you really gotta keep your wardrobe versatile. If it's Pirate Day, who knows, maybe that's your truth. So have a lot of costume parties in private spaces with your friends where the goal is everyone trying out something new. We don't have places in our culture where people are allowed to be like, hey, for 35 years I thought I was a woman, but I kind of want to change my mind. What if we had a party theme that was like, if you could just change your mind about gender norms one day, come. And I think party culture is an amazing political tool, right? Stonewall was a riot that began with friends hanging out. When you bring people together and allow them to celebrate, I think beautiful things can happen. And I just wanted to say, before we end, I'm so proud of you. And I wanted to ask if we could get everyone in the room to clap for you too. Because it takes a lot of bravery to be yourself, and there's gonna be a lot of rooms where people don't see you for you and are doubting you, but you just found a bunch of people who love you for you. So also feel that hope when things get tough. I love you.
Live, love, laugh, and don't forget to cackle. And I hope And I look forward to being invited to all of your parties, and I'm sure Karuna and Alok also look forward to being invited and attending all of the various costume parties that you're about to throw. Once again, thank you so, so much to both of you and to all of you for being such an incredible audience today.